Hey, amazing viewers, I love connecting with you all around the world. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will leave you inspired and ready to take control of your own life. In today's story, you'll hear about an incredible twist that no one saw coming. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. It was a night that felt like any other on the surface. Bright lights flashing, the low hum of a live audience, the excitement in the air as cameras rolled. But what no one could have anticipated was the storm that would unfold on stage, a confrontation that would leave everyone in shock. It wasn't the usual scripted back and forth of a celebrity interview. No, this was something raw, something that challenged not only the norms of the talk show, but the very assumptions we all make about success, power, and representation. The cameras zoomed in on the polished glass table where Jamal Harrison, the 42-year-old CEO of Sentinel Dynamics, sat, looking every bit the confident tech mogul. His navy suit hugged his muscular frame, his sharp features softened by the faintest hint of a smile. He'd been invited onto the Samantha Blake show for what was meant to be a casual conversation about his company's rapid rise in the tech world, how Sentinel had gone from a small startup to one of Silicon Valley's most influential forces in AI and cybersecurity. But the moment the red light blinked on, signaling that the live broadcast had begun, it was clear that this wasn't going to be a simple chat. Samantha Blake, the seasoned host, was known for her sharp, no-nonsense questioning. A veteran in the industry, she prided herself on getting to the heart of the matter, often digging deep, sometimes even uncomfortably so. Tonight, she was poised to do just that. She smiled at the camera, the practiced grin that spoke of years of experience, before turning to her guest. "Jamal," she began, her tone smooth but laced with an edge. "You've built an $80 billion empire in the tech world. But a lot of people wonder, how does someone like you break into an industry dominated by legacy players?" The question hit like a sharp jab, and yet Jamal didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. The audience, sensing the tension, fell silent. "I don't think success in tech is about legacy," Jamal replied, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "It's about innovation. If you build something that solves a real problem, people will pay attention." It was the kind of answer that should have settled the matter. But Samantha wasn't done. She pushed further, almost as if trying to chip away at his credibility. "So, you're saying it had nothing to do with strategic diversity hires? No one opened doors for you because it looked good on paper?" Her eyes gleamed with that familiar journalist hunger, an insinuation that was always a little too sharp, a little too pointed. The room seemed to hold its breath. Jamal didn't react immediately. Instead, he let the words linger in the air, giving the audience time to chew on what she had just said. And then, with the smallest of smiles, Jamal leaned forward. "Samantha," he said, his voice smooth but edged with steel, "let me ask you something. Do you think a company like Sentinel, that works with the Department of Defense, securing critical infrastructure, would put someone in charge just to check a box?" The words landed with the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if sensing that something much larger was unfolding in front of them. But Samantha didn't back down. Instead, she pushed again, determined to steer the conversation down a path that would expose something, anything, that could undermine his success. What no one expected, though, was for Jamal to turn the tables completely, taking control of the narrative in a way that would not only shock the host, but also the millions of viewers watching in real time. This was no longer an interview. This was a battle of wills, and Jamal was ready to fight. The tension in the air was palpable, almost suffocating. The audience, which had once been eager to hear the predictable back and forth of a tech mogul discussing his rise, now found themselves gripped by something entirely unexpected. This was no longer a polite conversation. It was a test of strength, of character, and of perception. Jamal Harrison, who had built his empire from the ground up, was no stranger to adversity. He'd faced criticism from every angle, from investors who doubted him to competitors who dismissed his ideas. But none of those battles had ever played out quite like this, live, on television, under the harsh lights of a show that prided itself on tough interviews. The stakes were higher now. The world was watching, and Samantha Blake, with her sharp tongue and seasoned questioning, had just thrown a gauntlet he was prepared to pick up. "Let's talk about your background," Samantha continued, flipping through her notes like a prosecutor preparing for a trial. "You didn't come from the same circles as most Silicon Valley elites. No Ivy League degree, no family connections in tech. You grew up in Baltimore, right?" Jamal nodded, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. It was clear where this line of questioning was headed. She wasn't asking about his achievements. She was going to dig into his past, as if the place he came from, his origins, could somehow undermine the accomplishments he had worked tirelessly to build. "And your parents," Samantha pressed, tapping her pen against her clipboard. "Your father was a mechanic, and your mother was a school teacher, correct?" Jamal took a slow breath, his gaze never leaving hers. "That's right," he replied evenly. Samantha's eyes flickered with something that almost resembled a smirk. "So, let's be real. It's rare for someone with your background to end up in your position. Some might say you beat the odds." The words hung in the air, sharp and pointed. They were meant to suggest that Jamal had somehow lucked into his success, that it wasn't about hard work, but about beating a system stacked against him. And though Jamal had faced systemic challenges throughout his life, he wasn't about to let Samantha define his journey for him. "I had to work hard," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "But I also had great mentors, great teachers, people who saw potential in me and gave me the opportunities to prove myself." Samantha arched an eyebrow. "And yet," she continued, leaning forward, "some would say those opportunities aren't available to everyone. That someone with your exact same background, same intelligence, same work ethic, might not have made it because of systemic barriers." The room fell silent, as if every person present was waiting for Jamal's response. He didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. His gaze remained fixed, unwavering. "Are you asking me if systemic barriers exist?" he asked, his voice smooth but now carrying an edge. "Of course they do. But I don't believe in using them as an excuse not to try." The words hit hard. The room, once electric with anticipation, now buzzed with a new energy, a mixture of admiration, discomfort, and quiet realization. Jamal had just given the kind of answer that most would never dare to. He wasn't dismissing the existence of barriers. He was challenging the very idea that they could stop him from moving forward. Samantha, however, wasn't ready to back down. "That almost sounds like you're saying people should just work harder and ignore the reality of discrimination." Jamal's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "No," he said slowly, "I'm saying success isn't about ignoring reality. It's about pushing through it. I knew the world wasn't fair when I was 12 years old. I didn't wait for it to change before I started moving." The words were simple, but they cut to the heart of the matter. Jamal's story wasn't just one of overcoming obstacles. It was one of resilience, of refusing to let anyone or anything define his worth or his path. The room, which had been tense just moments before, now felt like it was holding its collective breath. The message was clear. No matter what the world threw at him, Jamal Harrison would rise above it and take everyone with him. It was a moment of clarity, a turning point that would leave everyone questioning their assumptions. The room was completely still now, the tension having reached its peak. Jamal Harrison had turned the tables. What was supposed to be an interview about his company had become a revelation of a deeper truth. The audience, which had once been eager to watch the usual game of gotcha, now sat on the edge of their seats, mesmerized by what they were witnessing. Samantha Blake, the veteran journalist known for her sharp questioning, had been unseated. No longer was she the one in control. And as much as she tried to regain the narrative, the air in the studio had shifted irreparably. Jamal had exposed a bias that many didn't want to acknowledge, a bias that went beyond the individual and reached deep into the way society viewed success, leadership, and representation. But Jamal wasn't finished. He leaned back, letting the silence settle for a moment before speaking once more. His voice was calm, but filled with conviction, each word weighted with purpose. "Let's be clear," he began, his eyes scanning the room, catching the gaze of those who were still holding their breath. "This isn't about me. This isn't about whether I deserve to be here or not. This is about something much bigger. This is about the assumptions we make, about people who look like me, about people who come from backgrounds like mine. It's about how we, as a society, keep asking questions that distract from the real conversation." The audience listened, each person absorbing the message in their own way. For many, it was a wake-up call. Jamal had just peeled back the layers of a narrative that had been built over time, a narrative that made people question the worth of individuals based on their background, their appearance, or the color of their skin. He wasn't just responding to questions about his leadership or his company. He was challenging the very notion of who should be allowed to lead, who should be seen as capable, and who should be given the opportunity to succeed. "You want a headline?" Jamal continued, his voice now cutting through the silence with undeniable clarity. "Here's one. CEO talks about his company instead of justifying his existence." The words hung in the air, reverberating in the hearts of those who had been part of the conversation. Jamal was no longer just defending himself. He was defending every person who had ever been asked to justify their worth, their success, or their place in this world. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Because the truth is," he said, "the real story isn't about whether I belong here. The real story is about the work we've done, the lives we've impacted, the future we're shaping. And if I looked different, if my background were different, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. The narrative would be focused on my vision, on the company I've built, on the way we're changing the world." The audience erupted into applause, some standing, others clapping with newfound conviction. Jamal had turned a moment of scrutiny into a powerful message of resilience and defiance. It wasn't just about a tech company or a CEO's leadership. It was about the larger fight for representation, for fairness, and for the recognition of merit over prejudice. Jamal's eyes scanned the audience once more, his smile small but knowing. He had made his point, not just to Samantha Blake, but to every person watching the show that night. And with that, he stood up, extending his hand to the host. "Thanks for the conversation," he said, his tone soft but unwavering. Samantha hesitated for just a moment before shaking his hand, her grip firm but her expression unsettled. For the first time that evening, she seemed to grasp the magnitude of what had just transpired. As Jamal walked off the stage, he knew this wouldn't be the last time he'd be asked questions about his background, his leadership, or his company. But what mattered most was that, tonight, he had shown the world that success isn't about fitting into a mold. It's about breaking it. And with that, Jamal had not only secured his place at the table, but he had also made a powerful statement that would resonate far beyond the walls of that studio. In a world where so many are still judged by the color of their skin or the circumstances of their birth, Jamal Harrison's story was a testament to the power of resilience, hard work, and the refusal to let anyone define your worth. The real question was no longer whether he belonged. The real question was whether the world was ready to stop asking that question at all.